Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Claffey, Project Manager of CAP Network Ireland, and welcome to this EIP Capacity Building webinar today. Thanks very much to everyone for joining us. This webinar is organised by CAP Network Ireland on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And the purpose of this webinar is to equip groups and individuals with the resources and tools to complete their expressions of interests, not only for this call under EIP-AGRI, but for future calls. I suppose under Ireland's CAP Strategic Plan 2023 to 2024, we look to build on the success of the previous programming period of EIPs, where we had 57 operational groups, which were very successful, and Ireland was seen as a leading light in Europe in terms of EIP Agri. And I will point to some of those projects today, and we will also hear from a previous project as well, as you can see in the agenda. I suppose I will point out that this webinar will not deal with individual application queries or that. It's to look at them as a whole. But if people on the call today or other people outside the call have any queries or concerns or potential questions with their expression of interest from, we are happy to talk to you. And also the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine has set up dedicated email addresses to deal with the calls. So I'm just going to quickly go through the agenda first of all, and then we'll go into some housekeeping, and then I'll just quickly outline CAP Network Ireland before passing over to some of the speakers. So as you can see, we have a fairly cram-packed agenda for you today. We're going to have some opening remarks from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine in terms of Michelle Carney. Then my colleagues from CAP Network Ireland, Dave Barry and Eva Green, are going to go through what is EIP-AGRI and the supports offered by the network, but also what makes a good application and some tips and resources that are out there for you and for others to use in your application, and potential guidelines moving forward. Then we're going to look to the past to move forward in terms of Patricia Dean, who was project manager of the McKillie-Cullereeks EIP, and we're going to learn from her past experiences on what worked well, what didn't, and what learnings we can take from future, and just a very good look back to a previous project. Then there will be an opportunity for Q&A, and you will see the questions and answers box at the top of your screen. So please encourage you to put your questions and answers in there. And then we will have a couple of closing remarks as well. As we move on to the next slide, just a little bit of housekeeping. You would have heard when you came in that this webinar is being recorded. And we are recording this webinar so we can share it with people who are unable to attend today, and for attendees to look back on over the next couple of weeks when they are completing their expressions of interest forms. So we will have that online in the next couple of days for people to view. The chat is being actively monitored by members of the CAP Network team. So if you have any problems or questions or queries from a technical point of view, please do reach out to my colleagues, Sarah and Paddy. And I'll just ask Sarah and Paddy if they want to put their emails into the chat box there as well, so everyone has them. We will try to get through as many queries and questions as we can today. As we said, we mightn't be able to answer them all on an individual basis, but after the event early next week, we will send around an information pack where we will include some information on today, the presentations, the recording, also a survey as well. We really look forward to hearing your feedback from today's webinar, and a couple of other resources that might be useful in your application. So please don't worry. You don't have to frantically take notes or anything like that. The information will be available afterwards for everyone. As I mentioned previously, that we had 57 previous operation groups in Ireland, and we're very fortunate that 3 of these projects have been shortlisted at European level for the Innovation Awards, which is taking place in Portugal next week. So there's actually a public vote ongoing at the moment, and the deadline for public vote is tomorrow. So we do encourage you to vote for the Irish projects, to get behind them and support them. There's some excellent projects there. And again, I'm going to ask my colleagues in the chat to share the links on social media, through our website, Facebook, Instagram, where you can actually go and vote. And please do get behind the projects. They're excellent initiatives, and it's great to see Ireland represented so strongly at the European level. Out of 30 shortlisted projects, Ireland has 3, which is a huge achievement, and must be commended for their work. As I said, before we get into the presentation today, I'm just quickly going to outline CAP Network Ireland for those that are not familiar. Hopefully many of you are. So CAP Network Ireland has transitioned from the National Rural Network, which many of you would be familiar with. CAP Network Ireland is a dedicated membership-based network committed to sustainable agriculture and development in Ireland. Our membership includes farmers, researchers, advisors, rural communities, agencies, and other interest stakeholders. And our role is to promote networking, innovation, and funding opportunities under Ireland's CAP Strategic Plan 2023 to 2027. So you can get all our information on our website, capnetworkireland.eu. Within Ireland's CAP Strategic Plan, we support farmers and rural communities to create a sustainable future for all. I suppose I can probably hear you asking, what does that mean exactly, and what does that involve? So our 4 key areas of work are research, communications and marketing, management and implementation, and innovation hub. And again, this is a relatively new term and very much a difference from the National Rural Network. So please do encourage you to have a look at our website, and it's new sections that are all the time being added. So there's a lot of content and case studies and information for people to view, and loads to learn, especially about EIP-AGRI there. CAP Network Ireland is managed by 3 organisations. My own organisation, Irish Rural Link, which advocates on behalf of rural communities for sustainable rural development, both in Ireland and in Europe. Our partners are Earn Innovation, which is Irish SME that specialises in bridging the gap from science to policy, industry and society. And our academic and research partners, Munster Technological University, which is a multi-campus technological university with expertise in agriculture and rural development. And you'll hear from some of my colleagues from both organisations as we go through today's event. I'm just very quickly going to mention the Common Agricultural Policy, and I suppose I'll link back to some of the things we're going to talk about today. As we can see here, Common Agricultural Policy is a common policy for all for EU countries, and its key objectives are outlined here. I'm not going to go through them all today because they'll be raised later on in the presentations, but I suppose when we are submitting our EIP expressions of interest and full applications, we should always refer back to these key objectives and where does the innovation or the project or the local issue that you're trying to address, where does it fit into these key objectives? It's really important that we link back to these to show the need for the project or the innovation or the local solution that you have identified in your area. So just to reference that. I suppose last of all, I would encourage people, as I said, to join CAP Network Ireland. And why do so? To be part of a network, to stay in the loop. You can get the latest information about Ireland's CAP strategic plan, whether that's funding opportunity, case studies, insights, training and events like today. We'll be hosting future events as well related to EIP-AGRI, Leader, climate change, biodiversity. There's loads of events upcoming. To join our mailing list or membership, it's free to do so. And to simply do so, all you have to do is go onto our website. As I mentioned, I might get my colleagues to put it into the chat as well, so it's accessible to all. It's really important to get the latest information and keep up to date, so I would encourage everyone to do so. So look, that's a very quick rundown of today's agenda and I suppose what CAP Network Ireland is. And to start today's proceedings, I would like to pass over to Michelle Carney, which is Head of Division for the locally led section in the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. So Michelle is going to give us a quick introduction, I suppose, into to the topics, etc., and EIP-AGRI. So over to you, Michelle, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, James. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here. As James has said, I lead the locally led division in Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, and I have responsibility for EIPs in particular. As James has mentioned and has probably stolen a little bit of my thunder, James, but it's no harm, I think, re-emphasising a number of messages. EIPs and the whole area of innovation is a really important aspect of the CAP strategic plan, and in terms of that whole cooperation and locally led approach. We have seen under the RDP programme, which was the previous programme, it has been extremely successful. And as James had said, we had 57 projects and we funded 66 million. So it's been a phenomenal success. I think the Commission has now recognised that in terms of our 3 EIP projects that are there for awards next week in Portugal. And I suppose what these EIP projects actually show is the diversity of projects that we have supported over the last number of years. I mean, it's everything from upland habitats to peatland restoration to Farm Forest Alliance, right through to increasing biodiversity as well as farm health and well-being. I would also like to welcome today, on behalf of the department, Patricia Dean. She is the project manager of the one of the Acres cooperation projects and was also project manager for the McGillicuddy Greeks. And I'm sure Patricia is going to give you some very, very good insights into, I suppose, the operation, Patricia, of a proposal and how to write a proposal as well. Delighted to be supported by the CAP network. I suppose we opted for, and we had a choice within this particular call, so it's call 2 and call 3 of the EIPs, to operate an expressions of interest, very conscious of the fact that there are a lot of ideas out there. And I think one thing that we would be encouraging all people listening here today and people who are going to tend to or will submit expressions of interest over the next number of weeks is to be very innovative. We are very open here to very innovative ideas, thinking outside the box. This is why I think EIPs have been extremely successful within an Irish context. As James has said, yes, we still have to meet the key objectives of the CAP strategic plan in terms of our funding. However, EIPs, the fundamental of EIPs are locally led. And that is looking at local challenges and it's looking at local solutions. And it's really important then of how we can articulate that into, I suppose, those national and European objectives of the CAP strategic plan. Already, as people are aware, we probably have 2 very large flagship projects under the CSP currently. So we have the water EIP to 60 million. We have breeding waders, which we are funding to 25 million. And now we're going to focus on what we call Stream A type projects, smaller projects, but not anyway equally, I mean, as important. You know, we're looking at 2 very important elements here today. One around animal welfare and the second around women in agriculture. And I suppose the only thing I would encourage you.
Sorry, Michelle, we've lost you there.
You're just gone on mute, Michelle.
Sorry, is that okay?
100%.
Apologies. Just to say that when you're writing the document, and I suppose what we will be looking for is in terms of an evaluation panel, and we can just discuss this a little bit later in terms of questions and answers. But really, it's about 4 questions in my mind. In terms of an expressions of interest, has to answer what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, who is going to do it, and why you're going to do it. So if we can keep that, I suppose, high-level concept in mind as you listen to the other presenters, I think it will help you all in terms of how we will look at evaluators and as a screening process to invite a number. Now, we haven't said what number yet, but we will be inviting a number of the expressions of interest that meet that minimum criteria to come forward to develop proposals further. And we will give you support there as well to write those proposals. We're very conscious that for some people that this is quite new, but it's also very exciting. And we want to capture those local ideas, and we want to help you in terms of articulating those and applying for funding. So I'm going to leave it there, James, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Michelle, for that overview and some questions. I'm sure that you're probably already sparking, so I would encourage people to please put the questions into the Q&A box that is there on your screen as well. So thanks again, Michelle, for that. I suppose it is important to acknowledge the flexibility that was given in the previous round of EIPs as well. It was quite a step for the managing authority to take in Ireland, and I think they should be complimented, as well, as the groups that on the ground were doing the work. So, as Michelle said, EIP-AGRI is, has been around in Ireland for a couple of years, but is still relatively new. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Dave Barry from MTU and CAP Network Ireland, who's an Agricultural Innovation and Engagement Officer, to talk about what is EIP-AGRI and I suppose how CAP Network can support you in your application. So Dave, over to you, and thanks for sharing the screen.
Well, no problems, James. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'll try and be as brief as possible. So we'll just a quick look, really, what is EIP-AGRI? And the first thing is that we must be aware of is that EIP-AGRI is not a standalone initiative. EIP-AGRI is one of 5 EIPs, and they're kind of a dynamic and an innovative concept brought forward by the EU. EIP-AGRI then, as part of that, was launched to boost innovation within the agriculture sector. It's differentiated from the other 4 EIPs. They address areas like water, raw materials, and smart cities. But they all they're characterized by many of the same features. They're challenge orientated. They prioritize social benefits and modernization. That theme will come through in many of the calls that you'll see over the future for the EIPs. They foster collaboration among the research and innovation partners, and this is key. And one of the other areas there is they concentrate on like an outcome, and we'll look at that further down the line. And then there's an interactive innovation model. This goes beyond the traditional research that Europe had funded in the past, where it was a linear model. Now we have interactive, so it brings different partners from the start. The EIP-AGRI, then, the overarching objective is a combination of expertise and resources through the engagement within the public and the private sector within the EU. EIP-AGRI is committed to 4 really key areas. With the formation of the partnerships, we'll talk about that in a minute. And the partnership concept is really connecting stakeholders in operational groups. And then the EIP-AGRI program was really designed to address key environmental challenges and concerns, and then integrating measures from the supply and the demand side through the stakeholders who are members of the operational groups. The operational group then, or the OG as it be referred to in this, is really key to how the EIPs are going to operate, and really key for those people who are interested as well in starting their journey on EIPs. The kind of key principles of our operational group are that it's relevant complementary knowledge. So all members of the operational group must be able to provide something key to the project itself. And then it's a bottom-up approach. So that's also key to EIP programs. And then there's a co-creation. So that comes down to once all the members of the operational group have relevant knowledge, then they can be involved in co-creating and making decisions in the project. And you'll see throughout the application process that you have to kind of identify why you picked the members of your operational group and what key information they can provide. And you'll see that from some of the other people who talked today as well. So on kind of your journey then in starting your operational group, they all have complementary knowledge. They're kind of members then they can come from like ACUS, from the Agricultural Knowledge and Information System. And then you find you've identified a local challenge, then you choose the partners who can kind of work with you on this challenge, and then you can identify a solution then. So you build a proposal around this. But really, one thing we would like to say is that it's important to have a considered approach to your selection of your operational group and the members of the group, so that it can link well with your goals. I'm not going to read all of this. This is on the guidelines for first phase applicants, but you will see that like some of the key points, if you continue to refer back to this while you're making your phase 1 application, but some of the key things, it has to be more than 1 member. They must be based in Ireland. Each member has to have a real contribution to the operational group. And down at the end there, you'll see as well that 30% of the marks for the phase 1 application are on the quality of the operational group. So that's really, it just shows you the importance that's placed on it and the relevance of a good operational group. Another key point to be aware of is the operational group and the EIP-AGRI program is not a standalone program. There's nearly 10,000 operational groups established in the EU and over 3,500 EIP-AGRI operational groups. If you go to the EU CAP Network website listed there, you'll see you'll have more information about them all. And over the 2023 to 27 planning period, there's going to be, over 6,600 projects. So when you're starting your group, you must be aware that you're part of a much bigger organization. In Ireland, EIP-AGRI is administered under the Common Agricultural Policy, and through the CAP strategic plan, it's co-funded by the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development and the European Agricultural Guarantee Fund with national contributions as well. Ireland's CAP follows like performance and results-based approach, and then we have targeted interventions. And targeted interventions with regards to EIP, you'll see, would be something like Michelle spoke about, the water project or the breeding waders. There's indicative funding for this program of 36 million, so it's quite extensive. The team selection then, these teams, they align very well with the CAP strategic plan in Ireland and the overall overarching CAP policies within the EU. There was an expression of interest for a public consultation program last year, so people could directly inform the program direction. But then where we sit now with the Stream A, and really with the main purpose of this webinar is to talk about gender balance in farming and animal health and welfare. But further down the line, then you will see the other streams will be called in the other areas. And if you just keep your eye on the publications from the Department of Agriculture, you might see. So just a quick history. Everyone's going to talk about them, but like Ireland's journey really started in 2016, and there was a 59 million euro was spent on the first round of the EIP program between 2014 to 2022. It was extended to 2022. So some of the big projects and the standout ones were the hen harrier and the pearl mussel, and then the themes then were environmental in general. And you can see there's some nice infographics that were produced by the CAP network at the time. And you're going to hear later on from Patricia from one of the projects from that scale. So, but the key learnings, and like we CAP Network have done some research in this area about what the original EIP-AGRI projects, have to add, and what we can learn now as we go forward as well. And they really liked the idea of the bottom-up approach rather than top-down. They also the fact that they were working together, and the potential for transferability as well. So these might be local problems, and you might find an innovative solution for a local problem, but that can be transferred nationally and also throughout the rest of Europe as well. And some of the OGs in the past, they've said like they liked the idea of just getting a group of farmers to work together to find a solution. Sometimes it was interesting as well. They got to work with different sectors of government and non-governmental organizations. And then the EIPs in the past, I think a general reflection is it was buy-in from landowners and from the general public. So that's interesting to see. And then when we look at what supports CAP Network will be able to offer you as you kind of embark on your EIP journey, in the phase 1, which is where we are now, CAP Network are obviously hosting this webinar, and then we'll assist anyone who requires assistance at this stage in preparing their phase 1 application. As they go through, then hopefully those who are successful with their phase 1 application, there's going to be further information required, and CAP Network will be able to offer assistance with the content and the project plans, the level of detail that's required, and then how to access funding. The Department of Agriculture will potentially are able to release funding for the further stages of the application. And then as we go further down the line, then there's reporting requirements and the payment mechanisms that are required. Please remember as well to engage early and often with the department. If you have a question, they have a specific website, and they also have an email address for the EIPs that we'll share in the chat, and then people will be able to contact. With regards to partner search, so if people have an issue with this, CAP Network will send out, as part of our information pack following the webinar, we'll send out a Google form if you're interested in, if you're looking for a partner, or if you are somebody who would like to join an EIP and you have a specific skill set, you'll be able to register there, and we can share it with people who are interested. In the slide there, you'll just see there's an example of some of the people who are within our network. So you can always send us an email and we'll see if we'll be able to assist as much as possible. Key lessons then from past applicants. Some people have identified the shortage of time in filling in their application. The department have indicated that they will give people ample time. So that really the key message is to start as early as possible, and people will find like their success rate in attaining funding for projects is generally strongly linked to starting early with your application. Other areas then as well is just lack of experience of proposal writing. That's where CAP Network will be able to assist. And then kind of when people went through the application, then some of the problems were getting it started and getting it off the ground. That'll be through your phase 2 and phase 3 applications. You'll be able to kind of put the programs in place and at the early and at the start, so it'll ease it. Then during the project, then the CAP Network are responsible for like publicizing the Irish EIP-AGRI program. So we make videos, we share information on our website and on our network newsletter. And then also we can promote your events if you wish on our social media channels. Then kind of after the project, then you could look at CAP Network will be able to assist in reporting, and we'll make templates as well for reporting and at the final reports for the projects as well, so they're just in line. And we can promote the Irish projects as well. James already mentioned there's 3 Irish projects going forward in the European awards as well, so we've helped promote them. And then we can also offer operational groups assistance then after the EIP is completed. If the OG can feel the project was successful and could also be the starting point for a new project, then we have ourselves and IRL, also members of CAP Network, and Erin Innovation have extensive experience in getting national and European funding, and we will be in a position to help you going forward. Just an example of that would be one of the past EIP projects, Biorefinery Gloss, which was led by IT Tralee as it was at the time, now NTU, and that was funded under the original project for a fund of 940,000. The operational group had 5 members, and that project has gone on to attain DAFM funding for infrastructure for 3.1 million, and it's also formed the basis for a circular bio-based Europe joint undertaking project for the sum of €9 million, where 4 out of the original 5 members of the operational group have joined. And James Gaffey, who led this project, said that really the CBEJU project is just a larger version of an EIP-AGRI. He said it's very EIP-AGRI inspired, and that's really, it's really nice to hear that that project then went forward to create something greater afterwards. And that's it. That's just my information. If you have any questions, just please send them on afterwards. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave, for that. That was really useful insight, I suppose, into the previous learnings. And I suppose the word that I've kind of taken from it is, journey, the EIP-AGRI journey, not only for the groups themselves, for the department, but also for projects moving into the future, that there is other opportunities that go way beyond the lifetime of the project. So it's really important to highlight that. I think that has to be a key focus for all projects or for all operation groups. This is a starting point, and they're heading on their journey to something bigger and better into the future. I'm now going to introduce Eva Green, Senior Project Manager with CAP Network Ireland and Erin Innovation, who's going to go through the applications and talk about what makes good and strong application for it. So Eva, over to you.
Yeah, just need to unmute myself. So so for all of the three teams for the 2 calls, so that's call 2, animal health and welfare, the general stream, call 2, animal health and welfare, the intact pigtails, and then call 3, gender balance in farming in Ireland. So they all involve the stage 1, which is the expression of interest. So that is a relatively concise form, and that's to be completed with details of your proposed project. And proposals invited through to the 2nd stage will then need to develop a more complete application. So today we'll talk about the expression of interest. It is the same template, so we'll just go through the different sections and then we'll give some general tips on sort of completing funding applications. That said, it is really important for you to review the template as well as the supporting guidance that's been provided by DAFM and review them very carefully. Most of the information is contained there, And just to note that the slides from today with the various suggestions that we have, they will be made available after the event. And as mentioned by my colleagues earlier, we would also strongly encourage you to read up on EIP-AGRI operation groups, the aim of the programme, the relevant sections of CAP, as well as Ireland's CAP strategic plan, past projects, and so on. And there's useful descriptions on both the CAP Network Ireland website as well as the EU CAP Network website for that. So the first section, it looks for general information on the project. It's worth highlighting here that each operational group must have a lead applicant. In many cases, these are the people that are responsible for bringing together the various actors in the operational group. And the lead applicant, it could be an individual or an organisation, but it's really important to note that the details entered here will be the point of contact for all communication in relation to your proposal. Otherwise, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it is worth to consider making the project title or the name easy to read and understand. This makes it more useful for communication or any dissemination activities if the project is funded, as well as being more memorable for those evaluating the proposal. We'd advise you to think carefully about the timeline and what's appropriate and feasible in the expected timeframe. So in this case, it's 3 to 5 years. And also be very clear on the location or locations and know yourself why you've selected those sites. And more detail on locations can be provided later in the proposal. So the EIP approach, it envisages bringing together a wide range of actors. So that can be from farmers, researchers, farm advisors, NGOs, agribusinesses, foresters, or those with particular expertise in areas such as environment, science, animal health, etc. And that's not an exhaustive list. So for this part of the proposal, you're asked to enter the types of actors envisaged as forming the operational group, as well as the relevant expertise and experience that they will bring to the project. If the members of the operational group are already identified at this stage in the process, you can name them here. And one of the key things to note is that DAFM also needs to know to what extent these people will be involved. So, for example, will they be devoting all of their time to the project, so 100%, or maybe they'll only be devoting half of their time to the project, so 50%. And I suppose at this stage of the process, this information here is just to be indicative, and the final details of group membership and so on, they need to be fully agreed at the second stage of the selection process. So it is worth already for stage one just considering carefully the makeup of the operational groups and taking into account who needs to be directly involved, what they can bring to the project, and how much of their time is needed to actually complete the project activities that you're proposing. And then just a final part of section 1 is just to list details of other funding received for this project, if applicable, and this is just in order to avoid double funding. This is then, we'll move on to section 2. So section 2 is on the project details. It's really important for this section to note that that there are word count limits. They're just highlighted in bold on the slide, and these have to be strictly observed. So any text over and above the limit will be disregarded. And this means that it's really key to be very concise in what you're saying. And this here, section 10, it just says that they're just looking for a short summary of the project. And on the slide, we've noticed some suggestions on what to include, such as maybe summarizing some of the main elements of the proposal, including some keywords, or sort of, deciding on a summary that can complement the project name. And just for reference, the 28 words there are italicized. So kind of that is the maximum length that you would be looking for that particular entry. This part, it then looks at the actual project proposal. So this is the longest required entry. It's at 1,000 words, and you've just been asked to describe what the project is about. We would recommend presenting a short overview of the kind of the key challenge or the issue that is being addressed. So this is the why, and then outlining the objectives of your proposal, so the what. And I think at this point, I'd like to reiterate, Michelle, in that it is local solutions for local challenges. So it's really important to show your understanding of this at this point. Consider presenting an overall objective, and then also breaking it down into specific objectives that are SMART, that will both be able to help you explain the work at the proposal stage, but they can also be used to help you manage the progression of the work if the proposal is funded. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And it can sometimes be difficult to sort of meet all of those markers. But as a guidance, this might be one of the objectives might be something like organizing X regional workshops by year 2, where the invited participants will co-create and implement a process to do something particular, resulting in a report outlining the best practice that will be shared via another method or process. So, we don't need to go into too much detail on the objectives there, but we would suggest also going into further detail on the proposed approach. So the who, the when, the where, and the how. And you can link to the objectives if that helps, but try in any case to break down the process by building a rough work plan. So, what needs to be done over the 3 to 5 years and in what way? Is there a start, a middle, and an end to the project? Who will carry out the work and how will they do this? And when and where will this happen? And why does it need to happen there? So I suppose for this part, it might help to separate it out into different activities, different tasks, or different stages, just in order to help you sort of manage and balance your workflow. And it's also really important not to forget about communication and dissemination activities, or also management and administration tasks that can help you achieve your goals, or and also to manage the resources that are required for that. So Ireland's CAP strategic plan, it sets out very specific objectives that would underpin the sustainable development of Ireland's agriculture sector. Each operational group must be clearly linked to one of these objectives. And in this case, for these, the currently open calls, that's for intact pigtails and general animal welfare and health, they are included under Objective 9.N2, that's continuing improving animal health welfare standards and increasing awareness of AMR and ATR. And then gender diversity is included under Objective 8.N6, and that is increased opportunities for women in agriculture. So here you should think about how your proposal clearly addresses the relevant priority, and think about the expected outcomes of your project, and try to link back to your objectives if it helps you. As well as also considering, are there any other linkages? So what CAP themes or objectives does it meet? And is it relevant for other local, regional, national aims, plans, or policies? And probably worth noting that for this particular part, the word limit is 250 words. A key element of European innovation partnerships is that the operational group itself, that they themselves will identify the specific challenge that they wish to address within the calls. And then the group then builds its proposal around the specific sort of innovative way in which you propose to address the challenge. So here you're asked to describe the innovative elements of your project. And it's worth remembering, I suppose, that the bringing together of actors in an operational group to address an issue is not in itself sufficient to qualify a proposal as being innovative. So when you are thinking about the innovative elements of your project, consider, what is new or what is exciting about it. Is it going beyond, what's currently being practiced or the current sort of state of the art? And how are you adding value? Are you building on something that's already been tried and tested? Or are you trying something in a new way or through a new process? Then there's space to outline the envisaged benefits that could arise from the project. So what impact it will have. Again, link back and think to the objectives and the expected outcomes of the work and what the impact of each might be. It's also worth considering if there's any additional social, environmental, or economic benefits. Are there any benefits at a policy level? Are these benefits different over the short, medium, and long term, both within the project but also beyond its lifetime? And also worth considering whether you've included connections to all relevant stakeholders and target groups. You know, thinking not only in the participating group and the actors, but also if there's any wider benefits. And are these on a local level, or is there potentially like a wider audience that you can scale up or scale out to regionally or nationally, or even on a European level, if you could be engaging with other actors? At this stage of the process, detailed funding requirements are not needed. Here you're just asked to enter the expected total cost of your project, including VAT, but please note that reclaimable VAT can't be claimed. And at this stage, the estimate is broken into costs for administration and implementation. And it's also worth noting that successful applicants will be required to provide more detailed breakdowns of costs at the next stage of the process. That said, value for money is already quite an important factor in the evaluation. So, you know, be realistic when you're considering the amount that's needed to administer and implement the project. It might be worth building a rough but more detailed budget for yourself that lists out the costs, and that can then be built on if you progress to stage 2. And so EIPs, they're delivered by operational groups, which are mentioned as a group of actors brought together as one entity for the purpose of the project. So the operational group will be the contact point and the beneficiary under the measure, and if approved for aid for implementation of your project, so this is the final stage, the group must constitute itself as a lawfully or legally standing association or partnership which has legal capacity to enter into contracts with DAFM. So documentation relating to the legal standing of the operational group and its financial standing will be required if proceeding to the second stage of the application process. For now, it's just important to remember that signed PDF and Word copies need to be submitted, and that the deadline is on May 22nd at 5 p.m. So the documents should be submitted by email to the relevant address provided in the call document. And we recommend making sure you absolutely leave time for this in case of any last minute issues, such as slow connections or corrupted files. And it's also worth doing one last check of the file to make sure that nothing is missing, and that you've really clearly emphasized the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. So that's sort of just an overview of the form and the various different parts of it. So just the following includes a few general tips that you might find useful when you are developing an application. So in some parts, indicative information is required, for example, the budget and the partnership, but you still need to sell a realistic and an appropriate concept. It's worth checking the language that you've used to make sure it's clearly understandable to somebody who might be slightly less familiar with the area. For example, you might try to make sure that you keep to the same key terms, making sure that they're clearly explained once and then kind of used throughout the proposal. Consider the flow of the writing. I suppose from our side, we like to think of it as telling a story, and using a structure with subheadings can sometimes help present things very clearly. To reiterate again, just to make sure that you clearly cover the who, what, when, where, and why, and consider emphasizing some key points throughout by using bolding or italics, or even using bullet points or paragraphs to break up text. Linking your objectives, activities, and outcomes and impacts, that can sometimes bring a bit more cohesiveness to the proposal, and particularly because you can just follow it very easily from the beginning to the end. And just to re-emphasize that it's really important to stick to the word count, that any exceeding words will be disregarded, and you can use the word count as a guide to help inform you how detailed your answer should be. If it's one takeaway from today, it should be to keep in mind the proposed selection criteria. So you will need to score 60% across each of the 3 following. Roughly 1/3 of the scores go on the quality of the proposal. This is the technical, the managerial, and the scientific aspects, as well as value for money. And the next third are on relevance and impact, both to the identified CSP priorities, but also the clear presence of innovation, as well as the benefits and wider applicability in addressing challenges of animal health and welfare and gender balance on Irish farms. And finally, and this shows really how important it is to consider the operational group itself. It's the relevant qualifications and experience, the contribution proposed, and the representative nature of the group. So, I mean, really make sure that you've considered all necessary and relevant stakeholders in your proposal. And the selection criteria, they are available in the call documents from DAFM. So your next steps, I suppose, they might include building the right partnership, developing the concept, and then writing a proposal. So just remember to use the resources and guidelines available to you from the DAFM website, but also look at other past projects, and kind of you can find the details on CAP Network Ireland and on the EU CAP Network website to get a better understanding of the process. And finally, some very, very short recommendations on where to start. It's key to have the right partnership, and it can be really helpful to build a core group and spending time thinking about the key players that need to be involved. And to find these people, think about opening a conversation with existing operational groups, or contact your advisors, or you can also reach out to CAP Network Ireland. We would then recommend developing a strong concept. So look back at the call to understand what DAFM are looking for. Think about what kind of activities can help address the scope. And also writing out the concept can help, because it can help you build out both the idea and brainstorm the different parts of it, but it can also help you recruit additional partners to be involved in your proposal. And then finally, for the actual writing, there's just a few tips on making sure, you're matching the call scope, you're clearly stating how the expected impact will be achieved, ensuring your plan is convincing and that it involves the right people, highlighting the innovative elements, making sure the funding is realistic, and then building a strong team, and also try to write clearly. And I suppose here for references, I don't necessarily mean literature, but also if there are any other reports or examples, that could support your thinking and really showcase what it is that you're trying to do.
Thank you very much, Eva, for that. There's a lot of really useful and important information here, a lot of tips and tricks to help people with their application. So thank you for that. I suppose someone just commented that there was a lot of information there. So just to emphasize, we will share the presentations with people afterwards and the recording, so you can look back and get a greater insight to it. But yeah, some really useful stuff there as well. So our last presentation today comes from Patricia Dean, who was the manager of the Kilcullereeks EIP project, which is a hugely successful project. And I've heard Patricia talk about the project before, and I think her passion is evident for all, seeing her enthusiasm. So I'm really looking forward to this and to inspire groups going forward as well, and just some lessons learned. So Patricia, over to you, and thanks very much again for joining us today. And encourage everyone to join and put their questions in the Q&A boxes. Thanks.
Thanks, James. So guys, I'm going to give you a quick presentation here now. Hopefully it'll all go according to plan. So I'm going to give you a quick overview, I suppose, of putting a lot of what Eva said into practice. So hopefully you're seeing that there, James. You might give me a wink.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
Good man. Okay, so my name is Patricia Dean. I work for a local development company. So I work for South Kerry Development Partnership, and I've been working with them now for quite a long time. We're a non-for-profit organisation because we focus completely, everything we do is focusing on rural and community development, and we were established way back in 1991. So there are a lot of local development companies out there, and I suppose all of you would be familiar with the local development company operating in your own areas. So we do work on a lot of programs, and we had a lot of experience, I suppose, working with farmers in particular, but we also ran various different European projects. We would have worked on LEADER, SciCap, the WALK scheme, Local Employment Service, Rural Social Scheme, SkillsNet. There's a long list of programs there that we would operate in South Kerry Development. But I suppose, why did we think we would be maybe looking at something like this? Well, we had been working with farmers, building relationships and trust. And I suppose that goes back to what Eva said about the requirements and tips and having a very strong operational group. So we would have been working in SKDP on a pilot mountain access project. So like every good person from Kerry, I'll tell you a bit of a story. So this is a bit of how you can see how it came together for us. So SKDP were working on this pilot mountain access project in Ireland's highest mountain, the Kilcullereeks in Carnthool, since 2013, and we were focusing a lot of our effort on recreational access because it's privately owned land. So we were working with the farmers, and they had said to us an awful lot of issues, huge amount of challenges. And we were like, going, okay, well, what can we do to support you? Now, a lot of these were focused on recreation, like there's a lot of commercial guiding takes place, environmental pressures and users being ill prepared, lots of call outs for Kerry Mountain Rescue. It's all a designated land. So there's biodiversity loss occurring because of the recreational pressures, impacting huge numbers of challenge and charity events. Dog attacks, we heard about these in a lot of the upland areas. We would have similar issues to a lot of the other upland areas in the country. But a big one for the farmers was that there was a very poor economic return from hill farming. And that was something we were saying, well, how can we address that? This is going to be very challenging. So that's when we established our Mountain Access Forum. Okay, so that was our first step before we came to EIP at all. We had a bit of back work done, a bit of legwork done. So we established this Mountain Access Forum with the aim of protecting, managing, and sustainably develop the McGillicuddy Reeks. Okay, so bringing people together, and this is important. So we established this forum to help achieve our integrated environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Now, I have a lot of issues, lads, with that word because it's so overused, the word sustainability, but this was what our goal was, to try and do a little bit of integration. So we established this forum. Okay, it's very important that we brought all the key stakeholders together. And again, this was just on Mountain Access. This was not relating yet to the EIP. But you can see there, we had to get an independent chairperson. We had to bring the landowners to the table because the landowners own the land. They're the stakeholders. They are the guardians of the land. We needed to bring them at the table. Communities, not just the landowners, but also the communities, to make sure the communities were involved. The small and medium businesses surrounding the McGillicuddy Reeks, very rural area, close to Killarney, but quite isolated in its own right. A lot of guiding, like I mentioned earlier on, taking place. We wanted to bring the guides to the table with us, again, to resolve all the issues. South Kerry Development Partnership in the form of recreation officer. I was the recreation officer at the time. And then at the time, it was the Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government. That was the department that were looking at this Mountain Access project, this pilot Mountain Access with Fall to Ireland. The National Parks and Wildlife Service were there. They were very important again because of the designation, because of the fact that it's a special area of conservation. Kerry County Council being the local authority, recreation users because of the huge amount of recreational activity taking place, and then an elected representative. So we started this, guys, with the aim of, I suppose, looking at Mountain Access and what we could do with regards to Mountain Access. But I suppose we did a huge amount of work in a big area. So that's the area we're looking at covering. So it's about 10,000 hectares. And again, the majority of that would be designated land. And we know that this land is very important, like a lot of the other upland areas, in terms of high nature value, and that there's great ability here to deliver ecosystem services, but it's under threat. And we know that from a great report there that was done. And again, it's not just the McGillicuddy Reeks. This is happening all over the place. They are under threat from land abandonment. So we said maintaining the vibrant communities is important. So we were considering all of this, and the big thing still was that economic viability, and then just trying to, I suppose, support the farmers in terms of, maintaining that biodiversity as well. So the call came, and it came at a really, really good time for us in 2017, I think it was. So we took our structure of our forum and we said, right, these are the relevant people that could form the basis of our operational group. And Ava talked there at length, and the hints and tips Ava's giving you, the guys, I'd say anyone that has watched this today, watch it again if you're thinking about putting in a submission, because they are excellent. She covers all the main requirements for putting it together. So again, we added some people to this operation group that we didn't have originally. We didn't bring in all the farmers, but we did bring in a local agricultural advisor to support us. We brought in, at the time, their IT Tralee. It's MTU now. There had been a Kerry Life project operating in the area. So we said we wanted to take the learnings because there would be overlap. So we brought a lot of those in. Pagish we brought in, and that was really, really important. And obviously then the Mountain Access Forum, because it was again trying to deal with some of the common issues. And then we said we'd look to see if there was more issues. So that's how our EIP became an entity, I suppose. It was from the work of the forum and the work of SKDP initially in establishing the forum with the support of the partners. And then we took some of those partners and said, right, is there other issues here that we can address? Okay, so I hope the story is making sense. It goes back a bit in time. So a bit of the background. So we had to first, and again, Ava has mentioned this, looking at what are the key objectives in CAP and what are the locally led. There's no point going in and saying, you're going to this, you're going to do that. Nobody wants to be spoken to like that. That's never going to get you the goodwill of the landowners or the other partners either, for that matter. So we looked at the issues the landowners were facing, and we said, well, we can get some of these issues addressed considering the terrain that they're facing, the landscape, the climate, west of Ireland. We know that we have a huge proportion of rainfall here, high proportion of rainfall. So terrain, climate, succession issues, major issues around succession still is a challenge for us.
because young people are not getting interested in, particularly in upland farming, unfortunately. And then we looked at economically unviable labour-intensive practices, the time and effort needed to try and manage and make a livelihood from farming in these areas. We said it's really, really challenging. And then obviously I've mentioned already the recreational pressures, rising pressures, just down to erosion and wind management and things like that. So when we spoke to the landowners, this is what the main issues were. And obviously the picture there demonstrates quite clearly. You can imagine now if you're facing that in your land, you know, trying to manage this and trying to manage your livestock as well with it. So they were some of the challenges. But then we said, right, well, they're the main challenges, but there's probably more. So let's get out now and talk to the farmers. So we did a huge amount of consultation, and they said, lads, bracken, we're very concerned about bracken or ferns and how they're spreading. Gorse management, you know, so we would see a lot of is there a need for controlled burning? Is gorse taking over? Is this an issue now that's impacting on the habitats? Because we had to tie it all back to what the objectives were under the CAP strategic plan. So we said, is there a need for controlled burning? We'd have to look at it. We'd have to assess all the land. We've a major issue here and in the west of Ireland, I think, really with invasive species, but in particular for us was rhododendron ponticum. The landowners reported us, it's taking over. What are we going to do? They said purple moorgrass in Kerry, we call it fanon. So they were like, that can be a challenge. The grazing, if it's not balanced, there's like, this could be a challenge for us. Managing mature and degenerate heather in some sites. Recreation is having an impact. And then where's the time going to come from in the investment? Because all of these things will cost money and takes time to manage. So we said, right, it's great to have the issues. What are the solutions? Training. So I'd always use a little analogy of, I can't ask James there now, for example, to make me a Victoria sponge without giving him the recipe. He'd say, Trish, show me how to do it, or give me the recipe and I'll do it. So training, because we couldn't ask anyone to go doing any of these measures or trying to manage any of these issues unless they were trained on how to do it. So we developed best practice, and we took a lot of our partners' experience in that as well. So MTU were very important there. They had done a lot of research on a lot of these things already, and very supportive. So we looked at different initiatives, for example, spraying, cutting or trampling bracken. And again, Eva mentioned innovation. So we would have brought a RoboCut, a remote control machine on the side of the mountain. We didn't take it to the bottom, guys, of the Middle Weeks. We took it way up the side of the commoners to see how it would manage with some of the vegetation control issues that we're facing. And that's the innovation. And that was the great thing about the EIPs. It was about having the experience of trying different techniques, trying different things. We called it innovation. The farmers probably would have called it madness, where we developed the trust and the support of the farmers because we've been working with them, and that is important. So we looked at cutting gorse, we looked at grazing with cattle, we looked at different initiatives there. We set up collective groups because, again, looking at the big key constraint, most of our farmers, very small farms, time would be a major consideration. They would not have a lot of time. A lot of them have off-farm employment to try and sustain themselves and support themselves. So we said, well, what would we do? So we looked at other people in the community that would have the ability to avail of training, and then we set up collective groups. And this was a key success of our EIP project. Without those groups, we would not probably have got as much work done on the ground. So we gave the training, supervision, skills, the equipment to these collective groups, and it supported them in an economic return back to themselves. So it was one of the strongest things I think we did. So we didn't aim to do as much as we did in terms of, for example, rhododendron treatment, but we did just short of 200 hectares of rhododendron treatment. And that was hugely substantial considering the size of our project, because we were a relatively small project. So again, you know, the environmental side of it, when we talk about sustainability, it ticked all the boxes. We were meeting our objectives environmentally. We had the support of EIP-AGRI in terms of making sure that we were compliant with the site objectives, and we were doing everything in accordance to best practice. And, you know, in terms of financial sustainability, the landowners themselves were getting a dividend from carrying out this work, and they were being supported to do it, and that's really important. And then the social aspect of it, there was a huge social aspect to a lot of the work we did, because at the training events, farmers would be chatting, they'd be laughing, they'd be sharing stories. And again, when they were carrying out the works, they were doing it together. They weren't themselves trying to do these work. We used some new technologies that were being made available at the time, the no-fence collars, getting the cattle trained up on wearing these little collars and trying to use them to manage grazing on some of these huge commonages. So there was loads of different things, temporary fencing off of areas to allow for habitat improvement. And then, like I said, we put them doing all manners of things, the farmers. So these were all possible solutions to all of the things that we found. But all of the above could only be supported by the results-based payments and the project team on the ground. So leading back again to that locally led,
you have to have the locally led team on the ground. And there was only the equivalent to 2 of us full time. So I worked on myself, a part-time administrator and part-time ecologist. But we did great, and the farmers were hugely supportive of what we were trying to do, because we were all kind of leading to managing the same objectives, I suppose. So what were the open hour objectives? Well, we identified all the issues, the possible solutions. We set around writing the plan. There was great support actually in terms of writing the plan, putting the plan together, because a lot of what we thought we might have to do changed a little bit when we actually went out on the ground and did the assessments. So we said, well, we'll have to try and improve the sustainability and the economic viability of farming in the McGillicuddy Reeks. How are we going to do it? Through the development of practical, achievable actions and innovative solutions. And that was really important. There was no point coming up with something that people are going to like, that's not, you can't do that. That won't work. So again, our key stakeholders there being the farmers, the farm advisors saying, oh yeah, that could work for us actually, we'll give it a go. So they had to be achievable, because again, it could be practical, but it might not be achievable. Some of it was very challenging, but innovative solutions as well. So we did all sorts of things there to innovate. And why? Well, the end goal, I suppose, and tying it back again then to what are the objectives, key objectives of CAP? Well, we did want to improve the condition of the habitats in this area, in this Natura 2000 land, in conjunction with the landowners and the farmers in the area. That cannot be overstated. It's really important. So I suppose, guys, on the ground then, when it came to it, so I've already shown you the map, but that was the area we were looking at. And we didn't bring in all the farmers in this area, unfortunately, because we didn't have enough money to bring all the farmers in. They were dying for us to go for another round, if another round had become available, to do more. But it really demonstrated, you know, that there was a huge buy-in, because we had the understanding. And I suppose when I talk about challenging terrain, we had to do annual work plans. And that's the flexibility that the EIP gave us. You know, we could have moved things because weather would be a big constraint here. So we could plan to do works, we might not have been able to carry them out. But there's a flexibility there within the EIP to be able to move your targets if you needed to. So we did annual work plans, and again, it took the capacity of the farmers' time into account as well, what they'd be able to deliver. So we did different plans depending on whether they had commonage or non-commonage, and they were unique because again, each farm might have had different issues on the ground when we went to look at them. So there was no point drawing up the same plan for everybody. So that flexibility needed to be built in there, but listening to the farmer the whole time, listening to what they thought would work for them and how it could work. Okay. So again, and linking it back the whole time, what were the priorities? And in our area, it was looking at those areas of wet heat, dry heat and blanket bog, and again, using that results-based habitat assessment. So I suppose, guys, the good news was we didn't get shortlisted for the recent award, but we did get an award during the duration of our project. So it was down to the work, I suppose, of SKDP, building on the work that we had done with the Mountain Access Forum, that established the Mountain Access Forum, that the EIP came to be. And then we came second in the world, so it wasn't bad at all. We came second in the International Mountain Protection Award, so that was great. So I suppose the big takeaway I would have from this is that great opportunities exist if we work together. And again, having that strong operational group, locally led, innovating, do things that haven't been done before, and just, I suppose, listening to each other really, you know, so there are absolutely fantastic opportunities there. And I'd like to commend the department for taking the initiative and the big step, I suppose, to kind of go blind into the unknown, and also to the CAP Network Ireland, because we got huge support as well in terms of sharing our learnings, I suppose, as we went along through the process. So that's it for me. I hope that was succinct enough, and if people have questions, there's no problem at all. I'll do my best to answer.
Thanks very much, Patricia, for that. And it was a good storyteller for sure. There's a real timeline there for people to follow, and the collaboration between all the groups is evident from start to finish. So it's fantastic, and the awards were definitely just worthwhile for the group that you guys did on the ground, I suppose, and what that led to move forward. So look, we're going to go into questions and answers now. If I can ask my previous speakers as well, just to all turn on their cameras, and we'll just go through as many questions as we can. As I said, please do continue to put them into the Q&A box. As I said, we'll get through as many questions as we can today. If some questions cannot be answered or need further examination, we're going to be sending out an information pack afterwards where we'll tackle those questions in partnership with the department as well. So look, I'll just go through a couple of questions and I'll just kind of call on the speakers, whichever ones I think are kind of relevant to them. And I suppose, first of all, if we go to Michelle and Eva, in terms of the word innovation, I suppose, has been used throughout the whole thing, and how do we define innovation, and there's a question here, I suppose, to give examples of how EIPs can be innovative, referring back maybe to the pearl mussel and those that have been very prescriptive, Michelle, and I think that goes down to the difference between targeted calls and competitive calls. Maybe you might just give a little bit of an explanation why there are certain calls like that, and this one is a little bit more open to interpretation of innovation. And then Eva, just in terms of your own questions, well, if you could just go on a little bit more about the definition of innovation from how you see it and what it can look like. So Michelle, I might go to you first, and then Eva, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, James. And I would also like to invite my colleagues here. So I've Anne McGuire, Tracy, and Seamus from the EIP team in Daphne as well, that hopefully will be able to answer some of your questions. Yes, I've seen that question about the pearl mussel, and there was other questions about an innovation approach. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I suppose the first couple of calls under the RDP were very targeted calls. So we had the pearl mussel and the hen harrier project. These are much open, as I said in my opening remarks, that we're looking for innovation, you know, and Eva, I'm sure, will have more definitions about innovation, but just maybe to reflect a little bit on where the EIPs under the Rural Development Programme have come from and how they're actually driving innovation now, right? So actually the Pearl Mussel project, and the question is quite timely, the Pearl Mussel project launched its final report last Friday up in Uachtarard in Galway, and I actually have the flyer in front of me. So it effectively said that they had 492 farmer participants, and they actually scored 35,000 hectares, right? So this was piloting, and with hen harrier and other projects, we were piloting results-based. You know, these projects develop scorecards, and Tricia now is heavily involved in the acres, but where this innovation has actually now moved from an environmental and biodiversity perspective. So under the RDP programme, we had roughly about 3,200 farmers. You know, these projects scored in the region of about 80 to 100,000 hectares. Today, we have 30,000 farmers involved in acres that actually have a results-based element. Tricia, on the cooperation side, it's about 21,000, and then on the general side, we have another 10,000 that have opted to score their lands. Already, between advisors, between CP teams, we have now scored 1.1 million hectares. We have a phenomenal amount of data here in terms of the environmental and ecological and biodiversity status of our lands, both across CP forage lands, non-CP land, and actually across our commonage. And I think that's where the EIPs have driven this innovation. And maybe Tricia might come in as a CP team project lead, but it is phenomenal what has been achieved. But it really couldn't have been achieved from an acres perspective unless we had the EIPs and bringing those farmers along with us and testing a results-based payment system, developing scorecards. We have now 10 scorecards. So James, like, that's where the innovation, while and acknowledging that those projects may have been prescriptive in nature, in that they had one objective, but they've actually informed a much wider, I suppose, multi-objective program through acres. So I don't know, does Tricia want to come in as a CP team lead from the experience there, Patricia, and I think the results-based element?
Absolutely. I suppose like innovation can mean a lot of different things, and that's kind of one part of it, Michelle. And like we had looked at things, guys, like just if there's an issue on the ground and how you address that issue. So like a practical thing for us, an example would have been, we had a lot of rhododendron brash. Okay. And we were like, what are we going to do? We can't leave this rhododendron brash on the ground because new rhododendron could grow up on it. And we were like going, but how we dispose of it? We can't bring this off the site. So we were looking at, well, how can we manage it if we're trying to get rid of it? Because it's unlikely to look at in some of these beautiful areas in Kerry. We didn't want to be leaving them. So we said, right, we'll develop a frame and we'll actually pile all of our rhododendron on it, and we'll do a controlled burn on that. And we worked with our colleagues in Kerry County Council. So that's a very kind of a low level innovation, but that they all add up, you know. So they could be very high level innovations like Michelle is talking about, taking all the learnings from the results-based habitat assessments, the development of the scorecards, tweaking of the scorecards, but also then on a very basic level, on a ground level, well, what's the issue and how can we find a workaround, you know, and that's really important. There were small ones and there were big ones, but there were so many of them. I think we probably wouldn't have the time to document all of everything we did, you know.
Thanks, Eva, I don't know if you want to just come in there for just add on to that.
Just to again, like reiterate some of what we talked about earlier, you know, there are things that people are doing already that are sort of standard practice, and you know, what is it that you're doing that's going beyond that? So, you know, how are you, by trying something new, adding value to the system? And if, for example, you know, you might be building on something that's already been tried and tested elsewhere, but, you know, maybe there's something novel about the way that you're going to apply it. Or are you trying something in a new way or through a new process? Like, you know, for example, with the machinery in Patricia's project, like if that's something that's only ever been used in lowland settings and situations, and you know, you're going to think, well, I'm going to apply it in the uplands and see what works. You know, that's innovative if it hasn't been tried before. Or similarly, if there's a farmer who's implementing something new that nobody else in the area is doing, and it's working, and it's something that could be scaled up or applied on a much wider scale, but it needs to be tested. You know, if you don't want to roll it out across the whole country without testing it in an area first. So, like Patricia said, innovation can mean lots of things, but in generally, it's sort of, you know, going beyond what's new, what's novel about it, and it can be an idea, it can be a technology, it can be a methodology, it can be a process, but it's important to explore that, and again, looking at this local level and making sure that it's actually providing a solution to the challenge that you've identified.
Thanks very much, guys, for answering that. Michelle, just in terms of a couple of, I suppose, different issues that are coming up in the questions, I suppose in terms of timelines, then when do you expect phase 2 to be announced and the rough timelines around that, and maybe you might be able to answer that today. And someone has a question there, does the funding, is co-funding needed or is it 100%?
Okay, so I might actually just bring in some of my colleagues as well, to answer some of those questions, because it's nice to put names with faces as well, rather than email addresses within the department. So, and maybe I'll hand over to you, and I see there I'm joined by Tracy and Seamus as well. So,
yeah, can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, we're looking at doing maybe having a look at the expressions of interest that come in around the middle of June. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at for that, and then we'll come back to people then and invite them to put in their phase 2 applications. I don't want to be too to tie down too much, because it actually obviously depends a lot on the number and the extent of the applications that we get, and we want to be as fair as possible to everybody. So that's the timeline we have on that. What was the other question, James?
It was about co-financing. Are the projects 100% funded, or is there a need for co-financing?
Projects are welcome to seek funding in other places. What we're restricted by is that the public funding that we're providing, and there cannot be any double funding. So that's the main overarching rule, that you can't receive public funding for the same action from 2 different public bodies, or whatever you're implementing. But other than that, I think it's people are free to source funding wherever they can get it, to support the work that they're doing. So from that point of view, it's actually to do with public funding. So if it's public funding, then it needs to be restricted to individual actions.
And I suppose, and just to add to that as well, James, that, you know, these projects are funded 100%. So we're not looking for the operational group to put up a certain amount of funding. So it's 100% in terms of the budget costs between, as Eva had pointed, between the administrative element and the implementation and the farmer element. And I'll just pick up on another question, because it probably covers the whole lot around payments as well. There was one question there about payment through our department systems. So this isn't like acres. This is not like this. This is not like organics. The money is funneled through the operational group, and then the operational group pay the farmers. So that is the difference in terms of, and I suppose we need to stress as well, this is not, EIPs are not seen as a scheme. EIPs are projects that effectively have a beginning, middle, and end. So it's the operational group that's the conduit between the department and the farmer in terms of payment. So I think that's a really important point. So you're not relying on DAFN payment systems.
Great, Michelle, thanks for that. And this is probably a question I think that all the panel will probably address. What does, and I suppose it goes back to the scoring and the minimum criteria, what does quality of operation group mean to you? And I suppose, Patricia, I might kind of go to you on this, and then I might pass around to some of the other panels, because in terms of expression of interest, there's a large proportion of the scoring is going to the quality of your operation group, which is really important. So what does it mean to you, and what does it look like, I suppose, and if all the panelists can maybe reflect on that?
I would think like bringing people that are going to be relevant to your project, you know, like bringing people that that have experience, and I'd like, it could be, like I said, it could be farmers, guys in that area, you know, so to make it as relevant as possible, that everybody brings something to the table, and that will be important, just to make the members relevant, I suppose, really.
Perfect. Any of the other panel want to pick up on that point?
I suppose it's just to say that it just needs to have a minimum of 2 actors involved to form the operation group.
Perfect. Thanks, Tracy. That's the baseline. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. There's a question here.
I'm sorry, apologies, but just on that, to be absolutely sure, because we have seen it already with some EIPs, that the operational group has the administrative capacity here, because and I think Tracy and Seamus, like we've been through with a lot of shorter projects as well, that the operational group needs that administrative capacity to be able to do the financial, to be able to do the reporting. And there are probably more requirements now coming on us in terms of reporting and governance around the CSP. So I don't know, Tracy, do you want to add to that? But in terms of your own experience and previous...
There is a document there actually about the setup of operational groups that was written as part of the CSP. So maybe, James, you might share the link and you might put it in the frequently asked questions that people can actually have a read of what it actually entails. Yeah. And there's the reporting requirements in that a little bit as well. So yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it goes back to choosing your partners that are relevant, can do the job that linked into it, and have the capacity and experience of maybe done it before. And as Dave, my colleague, said, if you need assistance, that maybe we have a network here that we can connect you with other people that might be looking for partners that have a similar idea or structure in place. So please do come talk to us. There's just a question around the gender equality EIP. Even I think this is probably for you. I think you reference it. What does local solution to local challenges mean, and how does it apply to the gender equality? Because that's probably a national concern. So how do you kind of feed that into a more local area and define the geography of the project or the target area of the project?
Sorry, was that for me? Or
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think Patricia had a really nice example, you know, of in her work where she went out to the farmers and she brought them together and she asked them what the specific challenges were in their area, you know, and that's really identifying and getting down to the detail and being able to address exactly what those people need.
Question then to the department here: is there any consideration for an extension given the close timeline to the BIS deadline that's coming up later on this month?
No, I don't think so, or James. Look, I mean, this is something we were conscious of 4 weeks. We felt maybe, look, like it was a time that, I mean, I think overall, Eva, I haven't done the word count in terms of pages, but it depends on, I suppose, whether you use single font or double font, but you're looking at 8 to 10 pages. So you're not looking at a very large, you're looking at a pitch here. Exactly, I think, James, as you had said earlier, and Eva, like, this is a pitch to us about a project. And to have that, I suppose, succinct, and that's it.
Great. Thanks very much, Michelle, for that. Another question maybe for you or some of your colleagues. How many projects under the gender balance call do you depend to fund? Is there a prescriptive number that you have in mind?
Maybe Anne can answer that.
Yeah, we want to encourage as many people as possible to apply, and it's very much an open call. We're looking for ideas, so we don't want to narrow it down too much. Ultimately, we're probably looking at full implementation. We're looking at two or with the maximum probably 3 projects at the most. But we want to have as wide a range of applicants as possible, really, and addressing as wide a range of issues. And we don't want to rule out anything out either, James, but it won't be any much more than that.
Perfect. I suppose we probably already answered that question. Is there a limit on the number of participants? I don't think there is, once they're relevant to the project and can have an impact and have a contribution to make to the group. I don't think there is a limit. Is that fair to say, or someone correct me if I'm wrong there?
No, that's fair to say.
Perfect.
At this stage, yeah, there's no limit on the amount of applicants that can write in.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Just looking at different questions. There's one here, Dave, I suppose that might be more relevant to you in terms of MTU, and I noticed, Patricia, that MTU is involved in your project as well. Does their education matter in terms of quality? I suppose in terms of the quality of the operation group, does having an educational body in there, or the education of the individuals, does that make a difference? And if either of you want to comment on that.
Well, I think if an individual or a group are going to be members of the operational group, once they're relevant to the group, and one of the key elements of this as well, it's bottom up as well, so it's led from the bottom. So it's not like the traditional concept we have in mind for research projects. But you would find, I think, a lot of the EIPs in the past had a university or an IT involved in the group, but it's not essential. And really, if the work can be done, and every individual within the operational group has a role, and the work is being done by the group as well, it's important. I would also like to mention there is a possibility between the phase 1 and phase 2 to add members to the operational group. So I know people are worried about the amount of time that's available. In the call document, the department did mention that you can add extra people. So, don't be in a big panic. That's where you can contact us, or you can go out to your own network as well and add additional members to your operational group. But the facility does exist between phase 1 and phase 2 to add extra members.
Dave, thanks very much for that. There's another question, I suppose, on the capital investment. Is capital investment allowed? Does it have any negative effects on the evaluation? So I suppose that's a project bringing their own capital investment into project. Has it any negative effects, and is it allowed?
It is allowed, and it wouldn't have any negative effects as long as it contributes to realization of the project's goals.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne, for that. Is that 60% in each category or across all 3 categories? Either, I think each category. Perfect. Thanks for the clarification. There's a question on the legal standing, I suppose, of the operation. Tracy, you've kind of mentioned that we will circulate the documentation within the pack that's going out next week, and that as well, to provide people with more information. Just looking through different questions, and if there's any others, please do feed them in.
There's a question there about ruminants.
Yeah.
Again, we just want to stress very strongly that health and safety general call is wide open. So anything that, everything is in scope for that. That's to do with animal health and safety.
Okay, thanks very much, Anne. Another one here for you. Does it mean if you take 3 projects, the 650,000 is divided by 3?
No, it's 650,000 per project.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Let me see, is there any other? So again, you probably alluded to the openness of the call, but there's a question here around a group of young farmers want to form an operation group to help them return to a rural area and take over the family farm, therefore increasing succession. Is this an option? I suppose that's a case by case basis in terms of the applications that come in. And would that be right?
Yes, it is a very open call, but I just pick up what Eva had said as well about the CSP objectives. So just go back to the application form and see what the CSP objective is covered by these calls. So that would be one of the factors that would be taken into consideration. Does it address that? And that is, at the moment, is gender balance and animal health and safety.
Great. Is there any downside or any implications for having groups that were previously involved in operation groups? Is it an advantage, disadvantage, or is there any kind of guidelines around that? For the department, if anyone wants to take that.
Well, I think what I would say, James, is that, look, like we're open, right? So last time round, like we talk about 57 projects, but there was a number of operational groups that had more than one project. So like there's nothing to say that a number of projects that come in can have members in more than one operational group. But I suppose the only thing to be mindful of once you're putting in those expressions of interest, that operational group member has the capacity if the 3 projects actually are successful. That's all I would say, but we're quite open to encouraging whatever types of consortia that I suppose the partners feel can actually lead that locally led approach.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And there's, yeah, the same question has come in again there from Billy as well. So yeah, once a group has the capacity to deliver on the project, there's no issue in terms of number. That's perfectly clear. Just looking for any remaining questions. Look, I suppose there's a question there about projects that were scaled up last time or adapted or that have gone into mainstream programs. Michelle, and you've kind of alluded to this, and I suppose we kind of would have always had this conversation, and you know, innovation in terms of a project can be something very small, and if a small element of your project can be very successful, brought forward into new proposals, new applications, new programs, it is definitely successful. Not all a project needs to continue. There's going to be elements that were successful and unsuccessful. So just to bear that in mind, you know, when you're completing an application, that a small part of your project can be hugely successful and drive it moving forward. It doesn't need to be the entire project. There could be a small component that's innovation. I don't know, Michelle, if there's anything else you want to add on there. You've kind of alluded to it, I suppose, throughout today's webinar.
Yeah, you know, and really, I suppose Acres now is really, it was born out of the EIPs in terms of developing that results-based, but there's also other elements. And I suppose one thing that I suppose groups need to think about, and I've stressed it already, they are projects, right? So it's looking at how do you then offboard, because there are other sources of funding available to drive that innovation to the next step. And this is what we're looking for. Like I would see this as pilot demonstration, proof of concept at a local level. I see Tricia nodding there. And then the question is, how do you scale that up if you're successful? But even, you know, and when I look at innovation, you know, sometimes we would see from projects over the 57 that there was initial projects set, but they were not the final outputs or the final outcomes. But that is still innovation in my mind. That is still key learnings. And how do you move up a step from that? And I think this is what we're encouraging here. It's about pilots, it's about demonstration, it's about proof of concept.
Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. Look, I suppose we're coming towards the end of the webinar. I suppose we've gone through a lot of the questions, and as I said, any questions that we don't get to today, that we will be sharing an information pack later, and so please do keep your questions coming in. I think there is some comments there around the timelines and stuff, Michelle, but you've kind of covered that earlier on as well. You know, the timelines are there, and hopefully they will be kept there. And look, there is a lot of resources there that hopefully from today and outside today that people can use to help meet those timelines. And we will do our best to get the information out to everyone as quick as we can next week in terms of the recording, the questions, the presentations, etc. So people will have them as a resource. And I think there's a lot of information that has been covered there across the different presenters. So just to thank all the presenters for, you know, their contributions to David, Eva, Patricia, Michelle, and I suppose also Michelle's colleagues and James and Tracy for their different contributions and answering those questions as well. So I hope people found it very useful and beneficial, and there's things that they can move forward into their own application. We have repeated that the CAP Network is here to help you. If you have questions that we can answer, please do contact us. If you're looking for maybe potential partners or you haven't quite delved through the idea, please do come have the conversation with us, and we will help as best we can. And just to acknowledge again that we have seen, you know, a hugely positive impact from the previous round of EIPs in Ireland. All 57 have had a real impact on the ground at a local level and nationally. And I'm sure it will be very much the same for the next round of operational groups in Ireland. And we as CAP Network do look forward to working with the groups, disseminating the information. That is the key component of our role as well, is to get that information out there as widely as we can. So look, I'm just going to finish it off there today by thanking everyone for coming. I hope you found it useful. We will get the resources out to people as quick as we can. And to again thank my speakers and also my colleagues in the CAP network for assisting with the IT support in the background. And we look forward to talking to you soon. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you.